Back in February of 2015, my wife, daughter, and I went on a family vacation to Moon Palace, Mexico, for some much-needed rest and relaxation. At the time, our daughter was 18 months old, and my wife was a couple of months pregnant with our son. Looking back, I'm not really sure why we thought the trip would be relaxing. Lacey had morning sickness basically every day. And because we were all staying in one room, it took Cadence forever to fall asleep the first night. Consequently, she slept all day and then was up late into the evenings for most of the week. Don't be fooled by these cute pictures. By the time our trip was over, I needed a holiday to recover from my vacation.
Take a vacation.
I'm on vacation!
The lesson my wife and I learned from that trip was that it's really not worth it for us to take our kids on vacation when they're so little and completely dependent on us. Until your children reach a certain age, it's really not a holiday. You're just sort of looking after your kids in a different location, minus the resources and routine of home life. However, 8 1/3 years later, things are starting to change. Our olders are almost 10 and 8 years old and much more self-sufficient and responsible. And our 3-year-old is just a real firecracker who doesn't want anyone to do anything for her. We're coming into a phase that I like to call the sweet spot, where we can go out and participate in fun activities and actually have fun. Our kids are old enough that we don't have to wait on them hand and foot, but young enough that they still want to spend time with us. My fellow Edmonton fans, the Oilers are in their sweet spot right now. Despite the fact that Connor, Leon, and the rest of the gang lost in 6 games to the eventual Stanley Cup champion Vegas Golden Knights, the Oilers were a legitimate threat to win the Cup this year. And they will be for about the next 2 to 3 years as well. So, let's have a look back at some of the reasons things went sideways for this group in the 2023 playoffs. First of all, and this was perhaps the most glaring issue in the postseason, Vincent Desharnais and Stuart Skinner made numerous rookie mistakes. I don't want you to get the wrong impression here. I like these players, quite a lot actually. Desharnais helped turn the penalty kill around when he joined the team, and Edmonton was 28-5-3 with him in the lineup this past year. Stu wound up stealing the starter's job from that overpriced can of soup and may ultimately win the Calder Trophy for Rookie of the Year.
Baby, you got a stew going.
The point I'm trying to make here is that these players are inexperienced, and on the biggest stage, it really showed. This sequence from Desharnais in overtime of Game 1 was difficult to watch, and it was a sign of things to come. In the 4th game of that series, he made a brutal read at the blue line and got burned wide by Victor Arvidsson. It's really quite shocking that a guy with nearly the same reach as Zdeno Chara got beaten so cleanly. Later in that period, he got outmuscled by a much smaller Kevin Fiala in front of the net, and the Kings capitalize again. The dreadful mistake showed up again in Game 1 versus Vegas. Despite having 2 Golden Knights players between him and his winger, he tried to force a pass through. It was intercepted. He lost his balance, and that game was tied 40 seconds after the Oilers had taken the lead. Later in the first period, he just whiffs on moving the puck on the penalty kill, and seconds later, it's in the net again. As for Skinner, I thought he played fairly well against Los Angeles in the opening round, aside from a couple of goals that leaked through him in tight. The second round against Vegas wasn't great, though. The thing is, it's not as though Skinner was letting in a bunch of egregious goals against. He just wasn't very sharp. You'd like to see him stop at least 1 or 2 of these, especially when the games are tight. But I'm not worried about Skinner at all. If you go back and look at his time in the WHL and AHL, he's steadily progressed over about a 3 or 4 year period. And I feel he's continuing that trend in the NHL. When he let in the tying goal in Game 6 against LA, which was just a really tough play, I watched his body language afterward, and I knew the Oilers would be just fine in that game because he clearly had the mental toughness to immediately shake off what had just happened. Both Desharnais and Skinner gained valuable experience in these playoffs, and I feel that will better prepare them for the grind of the 2024 postseason. Now, another reason I feel the Oilers bowed out of the playoffs early was the officiating. Now, again, I want to be abundantly clear on this point. I'm not saying the refs didn't want Edmonton to win or that there was some sort of agenda or conspiracy against them. What I am saying is that the mindset and implementation of NHL officiating and player safety is illogical, inconsistent, and incompetent. And when the playoffs start, you got to hope and pray that your team isn't the butt of the joke that is NHL refereeing. Let's quickly, or not so quickly, break this down. The whole idea of let them play is absurd. What that really means is we are going to allow a whole bunch of penalties to go unpenalized. And this is something that is ingrained in hockey culture. Best I can tell, the prevailing logic behind this is, well, it'll make for more intense battles. I am all for watching guys battle for the puck. It's actually my favorite part of the sport to watch or participate in. But the problem is when you allow guys to slash, trip, cross-check, and hold in order to win these battles, all you're really doing is diminishing the value of skill. Just like in any other sport, the top players in the league have worked for years on their abilities, hand-eye coordination, balance, reflexes, and so on, in order to be the best. And every year, for 2 months, the league completely levels the playing field by allowing primitive actions to smother talent. And they seriously wonder why hockey is the least popular of the 4 major North American sports and grows at the slowest rate. Call the rule book in the playoffs. The players will adjust. Anyway, the powers that be that run the league are far too stubborn and old school to ever do that. So, at the very least, they could tell the officials to be consistent in order to maintain the integrity of the game. So, for example, at the beginning of the playoffs, tell the referees only call infractions that directly negate a scoring chance or that could cause an injury or do cause an injury. But no, instead, they'll watch a guy who's killing a penalty abandon his defensive positioning and come all the way across the ice to deliver a knee-on-knee hit and not make a call. They will, however, penalize that guy's teammate when he retaliates with a half-hearted bounce off the ice slash that grazes the ankle. I could go on all day about blown calls from last year's playoffs. There were so many. By trying not to influence the outcome, the referees were at the center of almost every pivotal moment in the playoffs, influencing the outcome through brutal calls and non-calls. But the one that was the most impactful on the Oilers was the Pietrangelo one. There was simply no justification for him to play any more in that series after what he did. He came across the ice with no attempt to play the puck and brought his stick down on the arm of the playoffs' leading goal scorer. This was late in a game his team was losing, and it is clear intent to injure. And the measly one-game suspension benefited Vegas greatly. Petro played 20 minutes and 56 seconds, had an assist, and was +4 in Game 6. If you want to win the Cup, you got to hope you're the beneficiary of such silly judgment calls by the league. And the final reason I feel Edmonton came up short this year, and it was something that plagued them at times throughout the season, a lack of focus. We saw this issue rear its ugly head a few times during the year. Most notably, in a November game against New Jersey, where they had a late third period lead and gave up 2 goals in 7 seconds to lose it. The first goal was not great, but whatever, it happens. The second one, off the face-off at center ice, is completely unacceptable. Then, at the beginning of 2023, the Oilers had a 2-goal lead at home against the Kraken and were in full control. Then, they fell asleep at the wheel and gave up 2 goals in 31 seconds and went on to lose 5-2. Later on, in March, they had another 2-goal lead in Toronto and were controlling the flow of play. And suddenly, started coughing up pucks left, right, and center, surrendering 3 goals in 3 minutes and threw the game away. And this bad habit came back to haunt them at the worst time in the second round of the playoffs, as they gave up 2 goals in 50 seconds in the third period of Game 1 and 3 goals in 1 minute and 29 seconds in the second period of Game 5. If you want to be champions, you simply cannot abandon your attention to detail for multiple consecutive shifts. In the immortal words of Evander Kane, they effed around. And they found out. If you revisit those blown regular season games, had they won even one of them, they would have had a much easier first round opponent and home ice advantage in the Pacific Division Championship Series. Both factors that could have improved their chances. If there's one thing I've learned over the last few years, it's that the margin between winning and losing is razor thin. And because of the parity that exists in the league, the difference between winning the entire thing and going out in round 1, 2, 3, or even 4 can be something as small as a bad bounce, a blown call, or a momentary lapse in concentration. I don't know about the rest of you, but even though the Oilers won 2 less playoff games this year, I actually felt they were closer to winning the Stanley Cup. Maybe it's because they had the highest winning percentage in the league after they acquired Matthias Ekholm. Or maybe because they had the lead in every single one of their playoff games. Or maybe it's because you could make a legitimate argument that they were the only team that really threatened the Vegas Golden Knights in the playoffs. I'm curious to know where you stand. How did you feel about the way the playoffs unfolded? How close do you think Edmonton actually is to winning? Did you think Season 3 of Ted Lasso was as bad as I did? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.